Hello and welcome to another Josh Plays 40k painting tutorial. Today will be a little bit different. We're going to be looking at painting some MCP terrain, but some of the more smaller pieces for the table that sort of add to the decorative features. So for example, in this particular video we're going to be looking at the traffic lights, lampposts and the dumpsters. All are really quite simple to paint and really fun. Good sort of palette cleansers whilst you're in between projects. And I'm just going to show some sort of nice easy ways on how to get some of the main sort of colours down onto them and still making them look good, but while saving time as well. So without further ado, let's grab some brushes and get started. So the first thing I've done is undercoat all of the models in grey cere, and this just gives a good sort of smooth undercoat to the models ready to apply that paint to. And the first colour we're going to move to is Iron Hand Steel, and for this it's just going to be picking out all the metal parts. So like what I've done here with this lamppost already, sort of picked out the stem and all the way up to the top and coated that over. You might find you'll want two coats, but the one on this one went fine, and obviously not leaving the plinth till later on, as that will be a more sort of stony effect. But particularly on the dumpster here, the parts we're going to pick out, there's not too many on this one, but we're going to pick out the sort of dog symbol on the front here for the dumpster. So just sort of working your way around, making sure you get in the sort of grooves and recesses with this colour, and then also coming to the back part of it as well and getting the hinge here, and also obviously the side brackets as well on here. So just sort of give that a nice sort of even coat and smooth coat. Obviously you don't have to worry about being too neat at this point, because we are going to be covering up the rest of these parts with other colours going forward. And then once you get to anything on the lampposts, again we're just looking at picking out the stems of these. So you've got the main sort of pole sort of going up, including this part in the middle here. Basically the bits you want to avoid are the sort of plaque here, the little nodule for the switch on the side, the sort of cabling tubes underneath, and the casing entirely of this where the little man would be for the crossing. But you can coat the back part here in silver if you want to, or you can leave that to be yellow later on. I coat it up just to break it up a little bit, but basically once you hit the top of this collar, everything else at the top here for the light structure itself will be yellow. So just sort of looking to coat from this sort of top collar here all the way down, but just missing this little switch and the sign on the side here. So you'll want a nice sort of even coat. You would say you might find you want a couple of coats of this sort of working your way around, but take your time and let that fully dry, and then we can move on to the next colour. Once you've applied that Iron Hand Steel, the next thing we're going to do is move on to the plinths of the lampposts and traffic lights, and for this we're going to be using Dawn Stone, and you're just going to want to put a nice sort of even coat over the top of all of this. Again, you may find yourself wanting to put two coats down just to sort of really block in that colour, depending on sort of how much you dilute the paint, but just keep applying those thin layers until you've got a really nice sort of rich base coat on that model. Moving on to the dumpster, the main colour for this we're actually going to go for this one is going to be red. Now I've picked actually ball red from the contrast range, but you can literally use any colour you like really for the main body of these. The only part you'll want to leave for the time being is the two lids, as these will be black, but the rest of it you can pick any colour you like. I have some that are a dark green and others that are a sort of blue and orange colours. So I really do sort of mix these up a little bit. It helps break them up a little bit as well when they're on the tabletop. And again, I sort of mix between using contrast and standard paints when I'm doing these, just simply to again enrich the styles and the paints that I'm going for. But for this one, I'm actually going to try out the Bile Red. It's actually a paint I've not use too much of with the contrast range, so it's just nice to have an opportunity to try this out as well. But on a model like this, you should still get a nice sort of smooth coat. It's quite a dark contrast, as you can see here, so you get a sort of nice smooth finish. And as long as you don't go sort of too heavy, or you know, try and sort of use too much in one stroke, you will find it will dry sort of nice and smooth. Obviously do try and take care when going around those sort of metallic areas that we've already done, so we don't have to redo too much and neaten up. But if you do touch over any of those, then obviously just go back to your iron hand steel and neaten up before moving on to the shades. Once you've applied your base layer to the rubbish bins, the next thing we're going to do is look at doing the lids. For this I'm actually going to use Black Legion contrast paint, as this will just sort of flow nicely into the recesses and sort of start off by giving us a good sort of overall coverage, ready for when we sort of add some further shade to that, to sort of grimy it up a little bit, as naturally these would be. So do obviously take your time, try not to get it on the silver that you've already painted, but if you do, you can always sort of neaten back up again with iron hand steel afterwards, and then obviously moving on from there. And obviously do take care not to hit the sort of main primary colour that you've already applied over the main body of the bin. So sort of work your way around each of the lid panels, and then we can come back to the next step. Once you've got that black applied, the next thing we're going to do is move on to some shades. And for this we're going to need a couple of different shades. First of all, we're going to be using Nun Oil, and this is to coat all over the metallics and bases of the lamp post and the traffic lights. So you just want a sort of nice even coat just over the top of all those metallics and the grey areas underneath. We don't allow it to pull sort of too much in sort of certain places, so especially at the bottom here. You don't want it to sit too heavily in these grooves, because then you sort of lose all the detail, but you want it to sort of darken down and add a slightly more sort of grimy effect to it, as these obviously will have been outside for many years. The second shade we're going to be using is Agra Shader. This is for the dumpster. Now there's a couple of ways you can look at applying this. First of all, you could look at applying it all over and really sort of dirtying down the dumpster, or you can be a little bit more selective in where you put it. But primarily the areas you really want to focus on, as I am here, are the areas surrounding the hinge. So you definitely want to be sure to get that on there. That will have definitely gotten dirty and started to rust over the time it has been outside. So do ensure that you give that sort of good coating over, but you don't want it to sort of sit too heavily. Just be sure to obviously leave any sort of recesses still sort of visible, so that it still shows the detail. And then also the sort of dog symbol on the front, that will also want to do it. But where you can then obviously start applying the shade is in the sort of grooves and recesses around the bin, if that's what you decide to do, and not the all over shade. So really that is sort of an idea of what you can do. For example, you could look at going down the sort of grooves here with it to sort of give a more sort of grimed and dirty effect. And then when we sort of come back in with some dry brushes, any sort of streakiness from these shades will obviously then be taken away. But sort of really add as much or as little as you want to, depending on sort of the overall look that you're going for with these pieces of terrain. I mean, the nice thing is, I mean, I've sort of, in keeping with the rest of the ones I've done, sort of looking at keeping them sort of a bit more on the dirty side. As I say, these are getting, you know, tossed around and what have you in the MCU. So, but yeah, by all means, however you wish to finish them off in terms of shading, that's fine. Once you're happy with those shades, the next thing we're going to do is just do a little bit of preparation work on the lamppost in readiness for adding in the yellow light to it. And for this we're going to be using a dry brush of a Thurin grey, and we're just literally going to sort of almost stipple it in over the silver. And this is just going to give us a nice sort of base coat, but you're going to have a sort of more of a splodge in the middle for that yellow to sit on. And then a more frosted effect around the outsides, which will then obviously add with the glow. Now this will look quite messy when doing it like this now, but once you get that yellow onto it, you'll find that will really start to pop. Next up, we're going to be adding in the yellow to the model. So for this, we're going to be using iron yellow from the contrast range, and we'll focus predominantly first of all on the traffic light here. And what we're going to be coating over is sort of all the parts really so far that we've left unpainted, aside from this sort of little panelling on the side here, which will be white once we're finished. But what you're going to want to do is just add a nice sort of even coat of iron yellow over all of these sort of grey sear parts at the moment, and then let that dry. You don't want to let this pull too much, because as I say, we are looking for a sort of smoother coat, but this is a really nice shade for these lampposts, and I do think it does sort of stand out quite nicely. And when you get a bit of a highlight on there as well afterwards, it has a really nice sort of shading, whilst sort of keeping it sort of in keeping with the fact that it would be a little bit more dirty, like we've done with the metalwork as well. So just coat that all over, including the sort of middle sign here and the posts and the parts that we've left, and then we can come back and do the rest. Next up, sticking with that iron yellow, we're going to be adding in the sort of light effect now onto the lamppost. And what we're looking to do here is just really coat inside the entirety of the lens and the glass that we've already coated. Now obviously this will be lighter in the areas that we have put the Arthurian grey down, and you will see obviously a nice sort of light spot come through, but otherwise it will sit a little bit darker in the recesses where it's still that little bit sort of metallic and grey. So that's going to be a nice sort of OSL effect for this. And you just want to gently put that over the lenses. Again, you don't want it to pull too much, but once this dries, this usually gives a really nice effect. Once you're happy with how that iron yellow has dried, we're just going to move on to now doing a bit of highlighting to the grey plinths and stonework on each of the lamppost and the traffic lights as well. And for this, we're going to be using a dry brush of Administratum Grey, and as I say, this is just to sort of pick out the sort of raised edges, so it's quite a light dry brush just to give that a little bit more definition, as the shading has sat very nicely in the recesses to give us that nice sort of grimy effect that you would have from, you know, seeing something sitting on the street all day long. So just carefully work your way around each of the plinths, and then you'll have a nice sort of good rough highlight over the top of there. With that light dry brush applied, that pretty much concludes everything we would need to be doing on the lamppost, as we've got that nice yellow glow for the light in the top. The metalwork is all done, and so is now the plinth. So you can set that one aside, and that model itself is all finished. If you want to add any more details, you can, but really that is the basis of it. We are still going to be doing a little bit more to the traffic light, as we've still got a few more details to pick out on that. And for the dumpster itself, the final thing we're just going to do is a very rough highlight of Evil Sun Scarlet just around the edges of this red dumpster, just to pick out any sort of raised bumps and edges that might sort of catch the light. So any of these sort of infills parts of it here, and the very sort of sharpest edges as well. So you don't have to add too much of this if you don't want to. If you want them to look sort of quite battered and weathered, as I say, which is how I sort of go with mine, with a sort of slight, as I say, a heavier shade of Agra Shader to really sort of dirty them down, then you can sort of leave it as it is. But if you do just want to brighten up the edges just ever so slightly, just to help them stand out a little bit more, then please continue with this step. So with that red dry brush complete, you can now set aside both the lamppost as before and the dumpster, as they are both now finished. And what we're going to be focusing on now is finishing off the traffic light. And for this, we're going to be just moving on to a Baden Black, and this is just to first of all block in this black panel here at the back here, that would traditionally then be the screen on which where the little man or hand would appear to allow you to cross the street. So you may find you'll want a couple of coats of this just in the back here, but just sort of work your way around and gently pop that in. And then also when it comes up to the traffic lights themselves, you can pick which colour you want to have lit at the time, or you can have none at all. In this one I'm actually going to be having the red light on, so the top one. So the bottom and middle ones, again, I will just be coating in black to show that they are turned off. So again, you'll want a couple of coats over that yellow, but do take your time, work your way around both those areas, and then we can move on to the next colour. And then, just like with the Abaddon Black, we're going to get a little bit of Evil Sun Scarlet to paint in the colour of choice. So as I say, for this one we're going with a red light. And then to finish off that yellow, we're going to be using a little bit of Flash Sketch Yellow just to do a edge highlight around all those yellow areas, just to make that really pop and stand out. And then just to add the finishing touches to this traffic light, we're going to be taking a little bit of Ard Coat, just thinned ever so slightly with water, and we're just going to layer that over the top of the lights, just to sort of give that glass effect and that nice sort of shimmer as well. If you want to, you can add it to the black square here where the little man would be, as again this would typically be glass on a standard traffic light, which I will do as well, but you don't have to do that. Also, if you really want to try your hand at freehand decals, then you could look at putting a little sort of green man or red man in there, or a white hand, depending on your chosen symbol, but for the time being I am just going to leave mine in the sort of, shall we say, off position of being just black. So that there concludes our work on the traffic light. And there we have a finished lamppost, traffic light and dumpster for Marvel Crisis Protocol terrain set. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. It's just to be a quick and simple way of getting these terrain features onto the tabletop looking good and ready for your characters to throw about and run around whilst trying to complete their objectives. If you have any questions at all, just leave them below and I will come back to you. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.